It's our top story today, ladies and gentlemen, and I have never seen the inbox fly as much as it has flown today, with so many of you expressing such strong opinions about a particular topic. Let's get stuck straight into it. A leading Tory MP has now called for all asylum seekers, to be detained until full background checks have been carried out. It comes after this astonishing case of an Afghan asylum seeker who was found guilty of murdering an aspiring Marine in Bournemouth last year. Lawangeen Abdulrahimzai posed as a child to enter the UK. This is despite having been convicted of a double murder in Serbia and denied asylum in Norway, and as well drug dealing offences, by the way. He was convicted for the fatal stabbing of 21-year-old Thomas Roberts in Bournemouth following an argument over an e-scooter. He was known to be carrying knives, to have an obsession with knives. He was posting videos of him fighting men for money in the streets on social media as well. And now Tory MP Lee Anderson wants tougher action to ensure violent criminals aren't able to enter the UK. Joining me now to hopefully answer some of the questions, and those questions, by the way, include the fact that this particular chap, posing as a 14-year-old, despite looking clearly much older than that, was allowed into a school. Parents of some children at that school have saved some horrific stories. I don't know how you'd feel about this, but GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White is going to answer some pretty shocking questions that we have to pose in this right now. Mark, Lee Anderson has come out, hasn't he, and said that the people should be detained. Easy to understand why in light of this.
It's a deeply alarming story, and it really highlights what we've been raising as a very fundamental concern for some time, which is those who are coming across, those who are being told that they need to throw away their documentation, their passports, other identifying papers, their mobile phones, invent a new name, invent a backstory to make all with the sort of the end objective of being able to be granted asylum and stay here in the UK. The other side of that is not only does that perhaps make their journey to being accepted for asylum easier for them, it makes it much more difficult for the authorities here to know exactly who they are. And if you don't know who someone is, then clearly you don't know what potential risk that individual might pose, what their backstory is. And this young man, we know, had been convicted in his absence of a double murder, a very nasty double murder in Serbia, where he shot two people at close range with an AK-47 machine gun over a people smuggling dispute there. Convicted in his absence, also convicted of drug dealing in Norway and denied asylum in Norway, and convicted of drug dealing in Italy. But doing this under different names, coming here, giving a false name, it's impossible really for the authorities to try to get an accurate handle on them. That's why Lee Anderson is now saying that we really need a proper detention policy until or unless we can actually determine who they are. This is what he told us.
Saying from day one, anybody arriving here illegally on our shores, because we can't do the full background checks, they should be detained until we can fully decide who they are, where they've come from, and if they've got legitimate asylum claim. If not, keep them detained in detention centres, and that's not too difficult to do.
Okay, get your views coming in on this, people. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Is now the time, in light of this absolutely sickening case, or time, frankly, to say, OK, if you do come over here across the channel or you're claiming asylum, you should be held in a detention centre while we figure out who you are and where you're from. But it's not just that. Once they're out and about, Mark, the fact is they're not really being monitored either, because this particular chap was brazen enough. He was on social media posting pictures with knives. He was fighting men for money.
There is no doubt this was a very nasty individual, and there should have been all kinds of alarm bells that were set off with the behaviour of this young man. I mean, his foster family, because
lucky escape, by the way. That.
Yeah, because he claimed to be a child, he was put into the foster care system. But the foster family were very worried about him because he was stealing knives from the kitchen drawer to go out, carrying that in and about the streets around Bournemouth and elsewhere in Dorset. This is him actually on the evening of March the 12th last year, when the murder of Thomas Roberts happened. This is his sort of whereabouts. He's caught on CCTV camera in and about the town centre, in buses and shops at that point just before this. There's other video that shows him actually in a confrontation with a group of men, and at one point he's actually seen attacking that man as well. Now, this is that bit of video. He comes into shot with the black hoodie there, butts that man in the face who's on a phone. And that was handed out by Dorset Police as an indication of what he's up to. There's other video that he posted on TikTok showing him involved in street fights, which he was actually getting paid for as a street fighter. Very violent images of him punching and punching. You can see an individual on the ground. There again, TikTok videos released by him, some of them showing knives, bragging about, you know, his big man lifestyle here in the UK, and all of the time, of course, being treated as a child, going to school alongside school children, sitting next to these school children, of course, was actually a convicted double murderer.
Exactly, and a bit later on this hour, I'm going to be talking to somebody who is a mother, who's got children, similar-ish age anyway, to the ones that would have been in a classroom, and reports are emerging of parents, people who claim to be parents, of people who were supposedly in the school, along with this particular individual. They are claiming, this is reportedly, that this chap was involved in fights in the school and was very, very vocal, and indeed made, this is the allegation, some children, girls in that school, send him pictures, which clearly, if they're 14 years old and he is an adult, that is in itself a terrible thing. Those are the allegations there. But when it comes to the age testing, Lee Anderson's suggestion is detention, okay? And I think a lot of people will think that's a sensible move. But age verification tests, Mark, are blocked sometimes because people think it's against individuals' human rights to have their age scientifically checked. That must change.
So the way it works at the moment, Patrick, is if someone turns up on the border, claims asylum, and then says they're a child, they are more often than not, unless it's very obvious to Border Force officials looking at them, they're to take best practice from social work, social services, unless it's very obvious that this person is a 35-year-old male and not someone of 14, 15, 16, then they will err on the side of that person saying they're a child.
I believe.
And what doesn't happen are more sort of scientific medical checks to determine actually what the age of this individual is. And you're right, human rights groups, lawyers say this is an infringement of the human rights, invasive tests on children who are fleeing war zones potentially, etc.
The fact is, Mark, Britain has a problem because when you do look at the sheer numbers of people coming across every year, I think it was 46,000 last year.
Just under 46,000.
Just under 46,000 last year. And the vast majority of those, all right, absolutely fine. But it only takes a small percentage of people to be a bit like this guy, and you do have hundreds of people who are a massive, massive problem and a massive, massive threat to this country. And then on top of that, you have the fact that people, as you're about to tell us now, are going missing from asylum seeker hotels.
Yeah, there is no doubt that there are hundreds of people with criminal convictions that have made it over to the UK. Law enforcement sources are quite clear on that issue. These people are coming to light when they're eventually, because criminals by and large reoffend, and if they get caught they enter the system, and then it turns out there's a whole backstory to them that they eventually are able to uncover. And that is the concern. As you say, it only takes a small percentage for that figure of 46,000 to actually mean that hundreds of these people are criminals. But you don't even have to have a backstory and a record as a criminal. You're coming here, you enter an asylum system, and you're doing nothing all day except hanging about with hundreds of other asylum seekers in a hotel, bored, access to alcohol and whatever else.
Yeah.
You know, it's clearly a potential red flag
Absolutely.
to the danger that people can get into and the harm that they can then, you know, inflict on the community.
And just quite quickly on this, Mark, because I want to go to some of our viewers live on this, because at the end of the day, they're the public, they're ordinary people out on the streets at the coalface of this crisis, the people, frankly, who will suffer, a little bit like that aspiring Royal Marine who was tragically stabbed to death by this individual. I am surprised by some of the reporting. Well, I'm not surprised, actually, by some of the reporting on this, where they're saying, oh, children, child workers are being kidnapped. There's kidnap squads going around to various different hotels and taking these people away. In your understanding, that's not the full truth.
No, well, certainly not sources that I've spoken to. They're very dubious about these reports in some of the media to suggest that these are children being kidnapped. What they believe is probably happening is that these are pre-arranged pickups to take people away who, by and large, may actually not be children at all and may fall into the category of Abdulrahimzai and actually are individuals who are over age or adults and who want to not enter the asylum system but go off and work elsewhere in the illegal economy.
Mark, thank you very much, as ever. Mark White, our Home and Security editor, just filling you in on a case that absolutely beggars belief, doesn't it? Absolutely beggars belief. But this show is all about you, and it's your views. And as I've said, never have I done a topic, I think, or never have I done a particular story on any show I've ever done that has garnered more interaction and more traction than this particular one, showing, I think, the level of public frustration out there. And I'm pleased to say that joining me now to give their views on this case are two GB News viewers. I've got Lee Webb and I've got Julie Ford, both from Bedfordshire. There you go, it works out that way sometimes. Lee, I will start with you. Thank you very much, both of you, by the way. But Lee, I will start with you. Your initial reaction to the fact that this chap, guilty of a double murder, drug offences, allowed into a school full of kids before he goes on and commits a murder. Your overarching view on this, Lee?
Shock and horror. Absolutely shock and horror. I think when we have asylum seekers come over to this country, there are a couple of routes that they can come over. There is a legal route where we can come, they come through refugee camps, etc., and their background is checked. However, in this case, that doesn't appear to be. Whether he had documents, and I doubt if he did, if you come into this country without documents, you should be detained indefinitely until we know who you are. And if that means turning some of our military barracks into detention centres, so be it. You know, me and my mates and our families, we lived in some of these military barracks for 2 years, 2 to 3 years at a time. The White Brigade didn't say that that was against our human rights, and they were perfectly okay for us. So they'll be perfectly okay for a few weeks for people coming over here without documents, for them to be detained until we know who they are.
Absolutely. Julie, I'll bring you in now. Same question, really. What was your initial reaction to this pretty horrific story?
Yeah, I've got to echo Lee there, to be honest with you. Just shock and horror. It should never have happened. And obviously I understand what your previous guest, Mark White, has said about sometimes it's just really difficult to trace these people in regards to their back history. But surely as soon as they are a criminal in another country, they've had fingerprints taken, they've had DNA taken. We've got the internet nowadays. We've got things, we can courier stuff across the country and across the world in minutes. Why aren't we able to trace these people's backgrounds? It really shouldn't be that hard. And I don't think there's going to be anything that we can do immediately to resolve the issue. I think we just need to stop what we're doing and rejig the system completely from how these people get into the country. Because as Lee has said, there are legal routes for them to come in and there are illegal routes. And the problem is the illegal routes, people are being trained and briefed on how to mess with our system, and it shouldn't get like that.
No, look, I think you're absolutely spot on. Lee, a concerning, apart from all of it, a very concerning element to me in this is how many fully grown men with criminal pasts will be sitting in schools with 14-year-old girls, boys, whatever, right now. And Lee, if nothing else is going to make people wake up and smell the coffee, surely that has to.
Well, even if it's only a handful, it's a handful too many. Like I said, if you're a genuine asylum seeker and you have generally come over here without documents, you'll be quite happy to be detained for a few weeks while it all gets sorted out and we find out who you are. You'll be only too happy, especially if you come from a war zone. And this is what we're also got to remember. Some of these guys are coming from war zones, so there could be a lot of mental health issues there. And then putting them guys into a school, you know, there's going to be things going wrong, and I think it's going to be too late.
But this is the reason why I love getting viewers on, ordinary people on, because all too often, I think anyway, your politicians or your rule makers, they're not at the coalface of this. They might not have kids. They almost definitely won't have kids in the schools where these particular individuals are going to. They won't be riding an e-scooter down a street in Bournemouth while some absolute lunatic decides that he wants to take a knife to you. And Julie, do you feel as though your human rights are deemed less meaningful, frankly, than the human rights of some people coming over here?
Yeah, I do actually, because at the end of the day, we're hearing all of this noise about the asylum seekers' human rights. It's an invasion of their human rights for us to take blood and check their age, especially if they're children. What about my human rights as a British citizen to be safe in my own country? Surely that's not right either. So where are my defence lawyers?
Yeah, look, both of you, thank you very, very much, and I would love to speak to you again soon, hopefully under different circumstances, I might add. But thank you very, very much. It's Lee Webb there and Julie Ford, both, conveniently, from Bedfordshire. There we go. Some real GB viewers there. You can get yourself on the telly, of course. You can get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk, leave your details, and you might get a phone call from one of our producers here. And you can give your views to the nation and beyond, of course, because we're everywhere these days. But you are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News, and could we all